Hi, this is Scott. Welcome to Tall Woodworker. In this video, I'm going to turn these scraps of red oak into something cool. Stick around, I'll show you how I do it. So you may have seen my previous video where I took a bunch of scraps from my scrap wood bin and turned it into an end grain cutting board. Had a lot of fun making that, and I think if I remember correctly, I hinted in that video that I also had some scraps of red oak, and this wasn't really a good idea to put in a cutting board. So these scraps are all from a coffee table that I made recently, and again, I'll bring it up. I lost the footage. There's not going to be a video of that, but I will bring it up a lot. And that coffee table was made completely of red oak, and so I had a bunch of thin strips that were left from that project. I had been trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do with all these red oak strips, and finally it hit me, and I had a project idea, and I'll be building that project in this video. Essentially, the thing that I thought of doing, the only thing that I could do with these strips, was to make some sort of wood and resin wall art, and that's what basically I ended up doing. Now, a bit of transparency. I'm recording this intro after I've already created the piece that I'm making in this video, so I already know how it's going to turn out. And I can tell you right now, it was a complete roller coaster. I had one original idea that got scrapped, then I had another idea that got scrapped all throughout the project just because of little mistakes that I made. But stick around because the end result to this project is really cool looking. Now really quickly, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters. If you enjoy this channel and you're wondering how you can help support me and get some of these projects going, please look at my Patreon page and consider being a supporter. No pressure, just take a quick look and see if it's something that you're willing to do, and if not, a quick subscribe or a like on the video is all that I ask for. So with that said, let's get started on this project. I wanted to create a somewhat random asymmetrical design. I started with one long piece, then I cut up the pieces at random lengths. I didn't want to wait for any wood glue to dry, so I used some medium CA glue and activator instead to stick everything together. I had two different thicknesses of strips, so I alternated them between the rows. The main idea was to not have any patterns repeat in the lengths or in the gaps between the pieces. So I'm not going to cut out any of the mistakes I made. You're going to see this project the exact way that I experienced it going through this. So the first issue I had is I'm not using a flat reference surface while I'm gluing this up. So once these pieces got completely finished, there really wasn't anything flat about the whole thing. We'll talk about that more in a bit. Next, to make the oak a bit more interesting, I took a torch to the wood to burn the grain. I've done this with oak in the past, and I really like the look. The contrasting grain patterns char at completely different rates, giving this really nice look. Now, the real question is, was it actually worth it to do this? Yeah, find out more later. Since red oak is so porous, I decided to use a seal coat of resin first. This is a penetrating resin that soaks into the wood, then hardens to dramatically lower the chances of air bubbles in the final pours. While the resin is drying, I can get started on the mold. I'm using some 3/4 inch MDF to cut a mold about the size of what I'm looking for in the final project. MDF is flat, cheap, and relatively easy to work with, so it actually makes a perfect material to use for molds. prevent the resin from sticking to the mold, I'm lining all the pieces up with this tuck tape. This is actually my first time using tuck tape. I used to use just some packing tape along with some mold release, and quite honestly, the tuck tape worked so much better than the packing tape. I'll definitely use this again, even though, yeah, it's more expensive than just plain old packing tape. Now I'm just using my workbench as a reference surface and screwing in the side pieces directly in. I use 3 screws on the shorter lengths and 5 screws on the longer lengths just to make sure that this is as sealed as possible. But don't think I'm a fool. I know that just a simple friction fit isn't going to be enough to prevent any leaks from this thing. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. I apply a bead of silicone caulk around all of the edges. Then I smear it with a popsicle stick, and this ensures that the edges are nice and sealed. I think I waited about 24 hours before I started my first pour, just to make sure that this was cured nicely. You don't want to skimp on the step. Take your time, make sure that it's done right, make sure that the caulk is nice and dry before you pour your resin, or you will regret it at some point. Okay, so now it's time for one of many pours that I'm going to be doing on this. So I've got my mold, hopefully all sealed up, and I've got a silicone liner that actually has a lip on it. So if anything spills, it should stay contained. Should being the operative word. Now, these are not perfectly flat underneath, and if I just start pouring all the colors like I want to, that's going to be a bit of a problem because they could all blend in. So what I'm going to start with is a base coat of resin using the white powder I intend to use for the bulk of this. So we're going to mix up some of that first, get that poured in here, and then we will put in our 2 pieces. So if this project is a roller coaster, this is the part where you go through about 5 loop-de-loops and a couple corkscrews all in rapid succession. This is where everything basically went, well, you know. So I'll just let you watch, and I'll explain a little bit as to what I did to kind of, sort of, recover from this. Okay, so, well, that's a bit of a problem. At first I thought I wasn't pouring enough resin, and so I added more. And that still didn't look like enough, so I added more. And now the problem is, there's too much resin. So, the original idea was for inside of each one of those holes was going to be a different color. But when all the white resin basically just oozed right out of it, kind of have to think differently. And so I decided to just complete the pour with all white, which is still going to look really cool in the long run. I'm going to turn the fans on shortly. The water pails here are really acting as a weight to keep everything down. The resin shouldn't be gluing them, but if it does, we'll figure a way out of that. And actually it looks like we are going to have some. That one is going to be glued down in there, so that should be interesting. But my idea is to maybe run this through the planer. That's about the only thing I can think of to try to rescue this project. So yeah, this didn't go exactly to plan, but I'm still going to keep plugging away at it, and hopefully we get something out of it. hopefully. Okay, now it's time to demold. So let's see, mistake 1, not making the piece flat. Mistake 2, pouring too much resin. How many more mistakes could there be? Well, I definitely did a good job with the sealing because I don't see any resin on the underside. So that's a good sign. And that came off a lot easier than I thought it would. A good old wacky mallet and a chisel is really all you need to get this thing separated from the mold. Now, for those who aren't aware, what you saw me struggle with there wasn't the fact that the resin stuck to the base. No, that's not it at all. It's the silicone along the edge and also just the suction that comes on there. Once you start breaking apart a little bit of it, usually the rest of it comes off. But aside from what it looks like right here, and that just might be attached to the chisel as I was nailing in there, that is a pretty clean piece of resin underneath. Fortunately, these molds are usually trash once you're done with them. And if you want to know what that sound was, I suck at basketball. I couldn't even throw it in a garbage can that was 5 feet away from me. So, kind of had to go back to the drawing board, and my idea is to just basically keep the white resin. I mean, it still looks pretty cool as is. Now, this is not the final piece. It still looks pretty cool with the white resin, especially with the swirls on it. But, again, this is a part of a mistake that I made. Originally, as you saw, there were different heights of all these pieces. I wanted a nice 3D effect. Well, when the resin poured onto all the wood that was on the inside, there was no way I could easily clean that up. So, instead of it being on this side, we're pretty much going to make this be the show side. And right now, that ain't much. But what I need to do is, after I clean off all of this leftover silicone, hey, that time I made it in the garbage, do a couple of passes on the planer to get the backside flatter. I'm not going to bring it all the way down to the thinner wood because that'll just make it too thin at that point. It's already kind of thin. And since this will now be the backside, we're going to basically get this side flattened so that I can start exposing the wood through this side. So let's get started on that. I'm going to spare you from the deep siliconing. So that sounds like a plan, right? Certainly that won't change at all, right? Okay, so I lied. Okay, so I lied again. So I just got done saying that, oh yeah, I'm gonna flip it over and start planing this nice flat side. Well, I started feeding this through and it wouldn't go through. And I figured it was because there was still some resin that was sliding on the planer table. I'm like, okay, maybe I gotta keep planing it down. And I just kept on going, and this is essentially what I got. And this is what I was looking for, well, technically the first revision when I said, oh crap, made a mistake and poured in too much white resin. This was about the look I was trying to get to coming out of it, but I thought it was gonna be on this side. Well, I didn't have to plane too far to get to this. I still have a decent amount of thickness, so I don't have to prop up the back any further, and I got a nice smooth back. I just have some silicone remaining that I have to get rid of. But that's amazing. It's actually looking really nice, and it's nice and straight, and I think this is gonna turn into something pretty cool. I have a couple of ideas, not just making this a simple wall art piece, but doing something with it, and let's see if I can get there. Hopefully no more lies. We're gonna sand this up to a pretty high grit. I'm gonna start with 60 on the back just to get rid of these lines that were left over from the tape. But then I've got sanding discs going all the way up to 400. And since this is resin, yeah, we're gonna need that 400. So it's time for me to do a lot of sanding. Now what I like to do at times like this is get some Bluetooth headphones and just listen to some music. I'll go ahead and unplug the mic. You don't really want to hear this, do you? Now I know you are all dying to see another epic sanding montage, but I really don't feel like doing that. So let's go ahead and skip. And skip. Oh, come on, skip. Okay, so after who knows how many years of sanding, okay, it wasn't that many, this is like buttery smooth. And I can feel some of the wood grain, but man, that is such a flat, smooth piece going on right now. Before I finish off this project, I decided to put a very slight chamfer around all the edges. This just helps break it up, and once it's in the final frame that I'm going to make, it actually makes it look a lot better. Of course, what would be even better is if I didn't get my head in the way of these shots. Yeah, sorry about that. Now that I got these new rough edges, I do have to sand it down a little bit, but just using some sanding sponges is enough to get through this. So once again, we're just going to skip, and this time for real. I have no affiliation whatsoever, but ever since I started using it, I absolutely love this Odie's oil. Goes on easily, cleans up easily, smells really good. It's just a nice, durable, natural finish for wood, and it even makes the resin pop on this thing. So yeah, I definitely like using this. It's my favorite finish. Okay, and as you can see from that reflection, that Odie's oil just has an unbelievable sheen to it. It'll dull down as it dries and after I wipe off the excess, but this is looking really beautiful. I'm glad I didn't do anything to the oak. I talked to a friend. He thought I should do some staining with it. Problem is that when I did a test strip, it stained the resin as well, so I didn't want to chance it. I thought long and hard about what I might do with this, and I just decided to kind of leave it natural and just put the oil coat on top of it. Really happy with what I've got so far, so I'm just gonna let it sit here for a bit. I might put another coat on, haven't decided, but right now she looking pretty. Now that we've got the finish on this and this is pretty much done, I got to do something with it. And luckily, the scrap wood gods have blessed me with one last piece of scrap that is going to be just big enough that I can make a nice looking frame for this. So we're going to do that right now. And yes, this did come out of the same scrap wood bin as all these oak pieces, so this doesn't count as a fresh board, it is a cutoff. Trick that I picked up. I'm actually not using a tape measure to figure out how long I need to make these boards. I'm using the pieces themselves as a measure. You can be a lot more accurate by taking real measurements instead of trying to transfer from a tape measure. Here I'm setting up for the bevel cut on these, and I'm going to use my small part sled to sneak up on the corner of these pieces. Now right now, this board is actually both the top and bottom, and soon you'll see the left and right pieces. Cutting them up at the same time, and then I'll rip down the width that I need for the frame. So here I'm just going to use some Titebond 2 to glue up the mitered edges, nothing fancy. I am going to use these corner clamps just to help guide everything together. These will hold the pieces at 90 degrees and do a really good job of just making sure it sticks together. Then I'll go ahead and fire in some brad nails and fill up the holes left by the brad nails with some wood putty. Okay, I decided to spare you the sanding of that, but here is our finished frame. It's all sanded and ready to go. Cut out a little notch in here. That's for the USB power cord to go through. Oh, I wasn't supposed to tell you that yet. That's a secret for later. Forget I said that. But right now, we're going to spray paint it black. Yep, nothing fancy here, just some flat black spray paint. Skip. Now it's time to put the resin art inside of the frame. I'm using those popsicle sticks as an offset. That way it's moving the piece just slightly back into the frame. Gives it a nice finished look to it. Now I'm going to be using some angle brackets, screwing those into the frame, and I'm double checking and making sure I'm actually screwing into wood through the back of this, not just into resin. The wood just is a better job for holding it together. And now for that secret I was talking about. I'm putting a USB RGB strip behind the frame, just sticking it with the adhesive and going around all the corners, and this should shine through the white of the resin and in the dark look really cool. And in the light it will shine through as well, just not as much as in the dark, but still just gives it a nice finished look and turns this into a nice glowing piece of resin art to hang on the wall. All right, I'm about to do the first plug-in of this setup. Wow. What's nice about this is it is an RF remote, so I can change the color straight from here. This looks wonderful. Some of the colors don't show through as well, like that blue, but this is really cool looking. And here we have the final product. Now, I don't have the RGB strip plugged in right now, and there's a lot of lights in my shop right now, so it'll be completely washed out, but I'll overlay a video of what it looks like with the lights off and the RGB on. Overall, despite the roller coaster that this turned into, I'm really happy with the way that this project came out. Wasn't what I was hoping for. You know, as I said before, I was hoping to have colors in here instead of it just being completely white resin. But like I said, I really couldn't be happier with how it turned out. This is actually hanging on a wall in my office, so I get to look at it every time that I get to work from home. So really excited about this. So what do you think? Leave a comment down below and tell me what you think about this project. Is it a good use of red oak strips and turning it into some wall art like this? Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Feel free to give it a thumbs down if you disliked it. Either way. Be sure to leave a comment down below, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Till next time, thanks for joining me in my shop. So you may have seen my previous video where I took a bunch of scraps from my scrap wood. You may have seen my previous video where I took a bunch of scraps from my scrap wood bin and turned it into God, resin everywhere. Okay.